Greetings from Pintpot. Welcome to my latest edition of Climbing the Curve, a series intended to make you the hunter, rather than the hunted, a little faster. Today I'm going to be taking a look at max upgrades. Now this could evolve into a rather protracted discussion given the fact there's empire specific weapons and abilities for each max, so I'm going to try and keep it short and simple. So to start, the weapons. As a general rule, you want to specialise your max: anti-infantry, anti-vehicle or anti-air. For anti-infantry, you start on your left arm with an anti-infantry weapon. Therefore, the best way to get double anti-infantry is to get the cheapest weapon available on your right hand, which costs 250 certs. I have listed the various names above. The same applies for anti-vehicle. On your right arm, you'll start off with the default short-range anti-vehicle weapon. For 250 certs, you can complete the pair on your left arm. If you like max gameplay, these are the rule of thumb best investments in the early game. The other anti-vehicle weapons available are the long-range option. I have put the names above. I would not recommend these in the early game. Not only are they very expensive, but they have much more of a niche role than the short-range anti-vehicle options, principally defending places like towers from attacking armoured zergs. Now if you're looking to specialise a little more into anti-infantry maxes, then the best investments you can make are in the long-range options for the TR and VS, which are the Mercy and the Blue Shift. Why are these the best? The answer is flexibility. They can do pretty much everything, either well or very well. In contrast, the specialist short range or medium range weapons really drop off in effectiveness at long range. Now for the NC, it doesn't matter nearly so much which weapon you're running. This is because all the guns are flavours of pretty much exactly the same thing. Some excel at say 7 to 10 meters, some at 4 to 8 meters. The long range option excels at 10 to 15 meters. In other words, the shades of difference between them are very slight. All the guns are good, all of them are absolutely devastating at short range. Now this is not to say you can't have your favourites, but ultimately it's not going to change your gameplay dramatically. Therefore in the early game I see no reason to change from the default scattergun on your left arm and the 250 cert grinder on your right. And if it drives you nuts that you have different magazine size on each gun, then you can invest another 250 certs to complete the pair of grinders on both your left and right arm. Now there is the option to put slug ammo on your shotguns. However, because of their low velocity, it's very difficult to hit a moving target past 15 to 20 meters with them. I.e. they push out your baseline range from 5 to 10 meters to 10 to 25 meters, but past that they start to drop off in effectiveness pretty dramatically. The Matic is the best option with them, but ultimately you can put them on any to reasonable effect. One other thing to mention about shotguns is extended magazines. The default magazine size for shotguns is 6, apart from grinders, which is 8. Now the problem is that, say you're running dual scattergun, each gun has 6 shots. That gives you a maximum potential damage per magazine of 9,360. To kill a max without kinetic armor takes 10,000. Therefore you cannot kill a max in one magazine. And in a face-to-face confrontation with another max, you'll be dead by the time you finish reloading. Now if you use a scattergun and a grinder with 8 in the magazine, it does bring you over that threshold 10,000. But remember, these are shotguns. The pellets are liable to miss. So really what you need are extended magazines to give yourself a comfortable margin when fighting enemy maxes. In this way you can ensure you get that necessary 10,000 damage down without having to reload. Unfortunately it's super expensive at 500 certs a pop for each gun. This will bump the magazine size by 4, so on a scattergun from 6 to 10. This increases your maximum potential damage, say you're running on dual scatterguns, to 15,600, which is comfortably above the threshold you're looking for of 10,000. Therefore until you get this upgrade, don't look to duke it out with enemy maxes, but rather look to farm enemy infantry. This is because at short range, dual shotguns one-shot enemy infantry. And so, onto the suit slot. Firstly, never touch ammo canisters. You should be running with an engineer anyway, and to add insult to injury, they're very expensive. So please, please, please ignore. There's also the Empire specific options. And in the early game, I would ignore these as well. And the reason why is they all have drawbacks as well as benefits, whilst the default charge ability has no drawbacks. The TR's lockdown ability is great for camping doorways, but makes you vulnerable to being flanked. The NC's Aegis shield is great for covering you while you're reloading or advancing in a location, but, and I'm not sure if this is a bug or not, as Zoe have not commented, it no longer absorbs explosive damage. Therefore you are 100% vulnerable to enemy C4 and grenades. And given C4 is the major max killer, this is a big downside. And as you won't have charge equipped, you're stripped of the main ability to escape from those sorts of situations. So stay clear of it in the early game. And the Zealot Overdrive for the VS I would stay clear of, full stop. This suffers from the fact that it was so ridiculously overpowered for such a prolonged period of time that it got basically beaten to death with the nerf bat. It's difficult to see what sort of role it has now, but just don't bother. Charge is the way to go. It gets you out of sticky situations brilliantly. It also allows you to close the gap or get out of open ground just fine. The only sticking point is upgrading it gets very expensive. In the early game, feel free to put 50 certs in to take it up to rank 2, but I really wouldn't bother after that. Not that they aren't helpful, but they just become far too expensive for the utility you'll get out of them in the early game. And now for the suit slot. And for me, for the early game, this is a bit of a no-brainer. Flak armor for everything in the early game. You use it for anti-vehicle and anti-air anyway, and it's also very good for anti-infantry as it protects you against grenades, splash damage from rockets, and most importantly, C4. Rank 1 flak armor makes the difference between being one-shotted by C4 and being able to survive. It's also, and this is the icing on the cake, far cheaper than the alternatives. It only costs 900 certs to fully upgrade versus 2,250 for, say, kinetic armor. Therefore I recommend investing 300 certs to get yourself up to rank 3 flak armor. Using this armor and being properly supported by engineers, you'll still be very durable against small arms fire, but no longer being able to be one-shotted by explosives. This is not to say the alternatives aren't good, but they are far more situational. Nano auto repair is great for when there's no engineers around and you're effectively soloing. It's also good in my opinion for when you're in the great outdoors, as the combat tends to be a lot more fluid. I also find that this ability works better when you're fighting at longer range against infantry. This is because it's easier to disengage than it is at short range. And by disengaging, you'll allow the nano auto repair to kick in. So in other words, it works better in my opinion on the VS and TR long range anti-infantry maxes. As the NC has to get close with all of its guns, it's not so optimal. Also, the lower ranks don't heal you quickly enough to be particularly viable. Therefore, to run this, I'd be looking for a minimum of rank 3, which is a rather hefty 750 cert investment. So it has its uses, but I would stay clear in the early game. Now the other option is kinetic armor. This makes you an absolute beast against small arms fire, but you still retain that inherent vulnerability to explosives. I find this ability is best for duking down enemy anti-infantry maxes. I use it specifically with my NC max designed to hunt down enemy maxes. But for newer players it has 2 or 3 major problems. The first is it's very expensive. The second is it's a non-linear upgrade, i.e. you get a lot more benefit from the higher ranks than you do from the lower ranks. And unfortunately the cost of these upgrades goes up exponentially as well. Really, if you're running this, you want at least rank 3 and preferably rank 4 or 5, as you still retain that inherent vulnerability to C4, so you need the much increased resilience against small arms to compensate. So my advice is stay clear of it for now and come back to it much later in the game. So that is my basic build, and it can effectively do everything. The default charge ability upgraded to rank 2, rank 3 flak armor, double baseline anti-vehicle weapons versus vehicles, and double anti-infantry weapons for those biodome farms. Now this doesn't exactly make the max cheap, but this is inherently a pretty expensive tool to upgrade anyway. But it will allow you to get most of the effectiveness you can out of the max. Now my next episode I'm going to be taking a look at shotguns. If you found this episode interesting or useful, please feel free to thumbs up, thumbs down, comment or subscribe as appropriate. In the meantime, happy hunting, have a good one, and Pintpot out.